I'm Denise Yamaguchi. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, and I want to welcome you to Eat, Think, Drink. Tonight's program is being recorded and will be made available on our website. So please silence your phones. Wait, before I start, is there music in this ballroom or is it outside? Okay. And refrain from talking as a courtesy to those presenting this evening. Before we start, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Central Pacific Bank. And I also want to recognize our other program sponsors, Alexander and Baldwin, Bear, Hawaii Longline Association and United Fishing Agency, Kamehameha Schools, Lend-Lease, Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits, the Ulupono Initiative, and Waihata and Company. The Hawaii Agricultural Foundation launched Eat, Think, Drink in November of 2016 to spark meaningful conversations about important agriculture and food issues facing our community and to engage a larger network of conscious and caring consumers like you. Tonight is our 22nd episode of Eat, Think, Drink. Fish for the future, are we overfishing? As our global population grows, we are seeing an ever-increasing demand for seafood, which includes some of our favorite fish in Hawaii. Over the past few years, I've noticed, as many of you probably have, there's a rising cost of seafood and even the availability of fresh fish at our local markets. I've often asked myself, why is fresh local fish so hard to find and why is it so expensive? And if we probe even further, what does the future look like? Will there be enough fresh local fish available for our future generations? To help answer some of these questions, I'm happy to have with us experienced industry experts. These individuals are committed to caring for our marine habitats and are truly passionate about their role in providing fresh, quality local fish to consumers in our island and beyond. Starting us off this evening is our keynote speaker, Lara Diederick, who leads external affairs and stakeholder engagement for NOAA Fisheries Office of Communications. Lara works especially close with seafood and commercial fishing communities to support an open dialogue with the agency. She also oversees FishWatch, NOAA's Fisheries Sustainable Seafood website, which was recently redesigned to make the information more accessible to seafood consumers across the country. Prior to joining NOAA, Lara directed public programs and community engagement at the Smithsonian Marine Station, a research facility at the National Museum of Natural History in Southeast Florida. We are thrilled to have Lara here this evening. Please help me in welcoming her.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise, for that very warm welcome and introduction. It is such an honor to be here with you tonight for this program, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to learn with you, learn from you, learn from the great panel that we have that will be coming up next, which is a continuation of what I've been doing for the past couple of days here since I've arrived on island. I spent the Monday, Tuesday, and part of today on Pier 38 in the fishing village. Had a wonderful opportunity to talk to men and women who work out there. And, you know, I have to say, I do a lot of travel for my work and meet lots of hardworking men and women around the country who bring seafood to us and make it possible for those of us who are not right on the coast to enjoy seafood. And you all have something very special here. So I'm so grateful to have that experience. So tonight, like I mentioned, with the panel that is here today and the expertise that they have, they're really going to speak to some of the real local issues. And I'm going to speak to some of the broader, like pull the focus out, speak to some of the broader introduction to U.S. fisheries and how do we know what that our seafood is sustainable. And so if there's one message that you take home tonight from my portion of the program, it's that U.S. seafood is sustainable seafood. And if you are a seafood consumer and you are eating seafood that was farmed or harvested in the U.S., you can feel confident knowing that that was from a fishery that is well managed and that it was responsibly harvested. but I'm going to spend some time telling you why I feel confident making that statement. So to get started, I want to share a little bit about NOAA. Some of you, raise your hand if you've ever heard of NOAA before. Probably most people in the audience, and probably most people are familiar with the National Weather Service. Some of you may have heard of the National Ocean Service. They use the coastal coastal management, mapping, marine debris, sanctuaries. So this is an image that depicts NOAA as an agency. We are an agency that within the Department of Commerce, and we are 6 interrelated services that we like to say we do science that goes from the surface of the sun down to the bottom of the ocean. So we are doing science in ocean and atmospheric research. We are doing that depicted at the ocean, our ocean ocean exploration and whatnot depicted there by the vessel. We have a service that manages our vessels and our aviation. We have the National Marine Fisheries Service that I work for. And all of these different agencies come together and help us be better informed about what's happening in the air and in the water below. So it's a fairly small agency considering all that we do, but we are deeply embedded within the community. And so even though I am based in DC and have traveled here to be with you, you do have a lot of NOAA folks in your own backyard. There's a very active community of research and researchers and managers here in Hawaii, and have several hundred folks over on Ford Island that are doing science. We have researchers at the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center, and the work that they do goes to support the management and conservation efforts that the folks at the Pacific Islands Regional Office support. And that's just in marine fisheries alone. There are other NOAA entities as well. So fisheries is Fisheries has a history that goes back about 150 years. If I can get the slide to advance, we need a little bit of assistance. Thank you. So the agency goes back, and in one form or another, it's been around for about 150 years. And I share this slide just to show that we have always been a science-based organization. So our early affiliation with the Smithsonian, I think, sort of drives that home. And although the agency we've seen different iterations of it, the science underpinning of the agency has never changed. We can have next slide, please. Thank you. So fisheries today our mission is fairly broad, but it's sort of simply captured here. We are interested in ensuring that we have productive and sustainable fisheries. A big part of that is ensuring that we have safe seafood supply for the nation. And then we're also interested in supporting the recovery and conservation of species and the ecosystems and habitats that they rely on. Next slide, please. Sorry, it's working again. Yay. But today we're going to focus on sustainable seafood. And like I said, why I want to share with you why I feel confident when I say U.S. seafood is sustainable seafood. First of all, our fisheries management process is a dynamic one, and it's ever evolving. So it's not one data point. You can't look at one day on the ocean and say, this is the state of the ocean, right? You can't look at one data point in a fishery and say, this is the state of that fishery. So it's ever evolving. And it is not I like to say it's a forever journey that we are on when it comes to sustainability. There's never an end goal where we say, okay, we're here, we've done it, we're sustainable, and now we can stop, right? We're always going to be monitoring. We're always going to be acquiring new science and new technology that's going to give us more information, and then we can be responsive and flexible to that. So we're also, NOAA has long been a sort of the gold standard of fisheries management in the world, and that's widely recognized. And I'm not saying that just because I am a part of the federal agency that supports fisheries management. I think there are a lot of folks that in the room today that and the panel will speak to that as well. We are have been made very positive impacts on management within the region, within our regions, and more broadly with some of our international interaction work. And then the last thing I'll say, the last thing I want to point out is that sustainable seafood in the country is critical for a food safety or food security standpoint, for equity and justice standpoint. And there are a lot of people who want to have a safe, healthy protein source that comes, that comes from the ocean. And aquaculture is fish farming is a critical part of that. So in order to meet a growing demand, eventually we're going to need to support more aquaculture in the United States. NOAA is an advocate of doing that responsibly. And we know that we can do it, and so that is where NOAA is focusing some of its efforts in aquaculture. Oh, there we go. Excellent. I just want to point out just quickly to show that our EEZ and the fisheries that within it is the largest in the world. We have about 4.4 million square miles of water. And our EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, that's typically about 3 miles from the coastline out to 200 miles. Those are the federal waters. So the immediate waters right around the coastline are state waters and are state managed. And but the federal waters are very large, and you can see they encompass from we have fisheries in the Arctic, we have fisheries in the Caribbean, we have warm water fisheries, cold water fisheries, we have shallow water fisheries, deep water fisheries. We also have fisheries that we manage holistically from the perspective of, we have commercial fisheries, we have recreational fisheries, we have subsistence fisheries. So when we are looking at the impacts of the or when we're looking at management, we're taking that sort of whole holistic approach. And then I just want to put this up here only to say, I'm not going to get into legislation with you all or get into the specifics of any of these laws, but I put this up here just to show you there are a number of laws that dictate what we do, and that we are mandated by Congress to have sustainable fisheries, to have fisheries to prevent overfishing where we can, to rebuild stocks when they are overfished. So when I say that I feel confident about the sustainability of our fisheries, it's law that we have to keep our fisheries sustainable. A part of the one of the laws, the Magnuson-Stevens Act, is also gets into the what does sustainability mean. And so we have these national standards that all of our regulations have to adhere to, and it takes a lot into consideration beyond just what's in the water, just fish in the water. It's also looking at how are what are the equity of allocation, like who gets to have access to the fish, and it's also looking at how changes in regulation might impact communities. So when we're looking at when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the fishery as a whole. Again, not just the fishery in the water, but all of the people and other resources that depend on that fishery. So when it comes to meeting all of these, different demands, we like to talk about this sort of three pillars of implementation of the Magnuson-Stevens, and I personally like to think of it as sort of like a three-legged stool. If you take any one of these pieces away, if you take a leg out of underneath a three-legged stool, you're going to collapse, and that is the same with our fisheries management process here. So we have science that underpins it all. Again, I said earlier, we are required to use the best available science to inform our management decisions. The management is an inclusive process. It is regionally led so that it's regional voices that are inclusive of different sectors who rely on the resource so that they are providing input into the process. And then enforcement, there's that piece that's making sure that everyone who's doing what they say that they're going to do. So all three of those are really key to keeping our fisheries sustainable. And then as we move through the process, like I said, one of the first things that we are focusing on is preventing overfishing where we can. So we have fisheries management plans, a number of fisheries management plans in place in different regions that essentially provide the guidelines, the regulations on how to manage those areas. And then we also we're constantly monitoring. So we are ensuring that the health of the population is or that the populations, the stocks are healthy. And so we do that through stock assessments and surveys. So constantly monitoring. And then we're being responsive to what we're seeing in the water. And so sometimes sometimes there's overharvest for whatever reason. Well, there are accountability measures. So if we take too much one season, then we take less the next season. Sometimes the environment changes, the environmental conditions just naturally change, and so we can be responsive to that, and we can modify the harvest amount that way as well. Right. Just wanted to put this up there again to just show the fisheries, the management councils. Again, these are regionally focused and regionally led, and each council has their own. Each region has their own obstacles and challenges that they need to face, and their own expertise on how to manage, how to handle those issues. So it is really driven by the regions. And there's a lot of words up there, so I don't expect you to read any of that. I put this up here just to show that the management process works, because we have rebuilt 50 stocks since about 2010 and early 2000s. So in the last 20 years, we've rebuilt 50 stocks, and so it shows that the process is working and that it does work. This is I wanted to put this up here because I mentioned earlier that NOAA Fisheries has been a partner in a lot of our international work, and that we have been seen as a global leader when it comes to sustainability. And this is sort of evidence of that. What you're seeing here is a graphic that shows back in 2016, we had a third-party group take a look at the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, their standards for responsible and sustainable fisheries. And we looked at our fisheries and our processes, and just did a comparison, crosswalked our standards in the U.S., and we met or exceeded every one of their standards. Specifically for eco-labeling. So that is, I share this just to say, again, when you are making choices when it comes to what kind of seafood you want and where you want to get it from. All you need to know, first and foremost, is where does it come from? And if it comes from the US, you can feel good about eating it. All right, I want to finish up tonight by just sharing with you the FishWatch, a little update about fishwatch.gov, which is a resource that we have. I added a QR code there, so if you want to take a look at that website. This is the NOAA Fisheries website for sharing information about sustainable seafood in the US. This is not inclusive of imported species. It's not inclusive of freshwater species. So there are some limitations, but there's a lot of good information there's about 120 of the most popular species of seafood from around the country. It has information about, if you click over, you can see there's a section about understanding sustainable seafood. What does it mean to be sustainable? And provide some information there. But I want to focus on the seafood profiles section, and that is you can scroll through all of the profiles. You can search by the species name. It searches whether you use the scientific name or a local name or the official USDA or FDA has an official market name that they use. So it searches through all those different names. You can search by region. So here, if we click on the Pacific Islands region, it'll pull up the profiles, and you can kind of scroll through and see just some of the profiles that are available. So I just wanted to show you a couple of examples. So we'll pick the Pacific Big Eye tuna. Again, you can see it provides a good overview of whether the if the population is overfished, if the fishing rate is experiencing overfishing, impacts to the habitat, and whether there are any concerns about bycatch. You click the other tab that says seafood. It provides information about the taste, texture. In some of if you scroll down a little bit more, you might see recipes. We have nutritional information. So everything that a seafood consumer might want to know. There's high level information, and then if you really want to dig in and learn more, then you can do that. There's also, just to show another example, the swordfish. Again, it gives you an idea of, as you scroll down, you'll notice some of the, in the boxes there, some of the information is, it's pretty brief. So maybe that's all the information you want, and then you can move on. But if you scroll down further on this page, and this is just a screenshot, so I can't do that, unfortunately, but if you scroll down further, there's tons of information to supporting why we are making that claim. And again, additional information about the seafood, looking at it from specifically a seafood perspective. And with that, I just want to encourage you to take a look at FishWatch. Encourage you to eat U.S. seafood. I know I have thoroughly enjoyed eating local Hawaiian seafood, I think, at every meal since I've been here. And just thank you all again for allowing me to be a part of this program.
So I want to thank everybody for the people that came late, because I know parking was an issue. And we do have some seats in the front. If you guys okay standing in the back? Yeah? Okay. Anyway, thank you, Laura, for setting the stage for a great discussion tonight. I want to call up our panelists and welcome our moderator, Kelly Simek, who many of you know as a seasoned local journalist and host of KHON's widely popular morning show, Living 808. Kelly has been a longtime proponent of HAF's mission, so I want to thank her again for coming out to support us. So our panelists, will you come to the stage?
Aloha, everyone. Welcome. How you doing? And hey, guys. All right. So we're going to be talking about all things fishing, and I'm excited to be welcoming up. I'm going to introduce all of these folks who I'm going to be asking questions to. And we're going to have a question and answer portion in the ending as well. So I'm going to ask them some questions that are at top of my mind. But my friends from Ahi Assassins just messaged me, and they're like, we want to make sure the local fishermen are getting their piece in. And so we're going to be getting audience question and input too. So please start thinking of what you also want to talk about. And we're going to be calling on you guys in just a little bit. All right, but I want to be introducing our awesome panel that we have today. We're going to start with Brooks Takanaka. And I feel like everyone knows and loves Brooks, of course, with the auction, and we'll talk a little bit more about him in just a bit. Next, we have Eric Kingma, and then we have Clay Tam. And as I am introducing, actually, if you guys can kind of say a little bit about yourself. So, Brooks, let's hear from you first, a bit about your background and what you do.
Well, good evening. I'm the general manager of the United Fishing Agency. I come from born and raised in a fishing family, a commercial fishing family. My grandfather and family were longline fishermen. And so I do have an extensive background in fishing and fisheries in Hawaii. Been with the auction for about 45 years now. So I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen the evolution of our fisheries as well as our marketing system. And I think we're going to talk about some pretty interesting things this evening. So we'll give it away.
Awesome. Yeah, give it up for Brooks, guys. All right, and next up we have Eric. Talk about yourself.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Eric Kingma. I'm the executive director of the Hawaii Longline Association. A little bit about myself. Born in Hawaii, did move away for high school and college. Also come from a fishing family on my father's side in the Pacific Northwest, salmon commercial fishermen. Been involved in fisheries management for about 20 plus years, and in the current role as executive director of HLA for about 4.5 years. Working in the fishing industry, you got to wake up early these days, and I'm just glad my socks match in front of you guys. Thanks. Good turnout. Nice to see you guys.
And then, of course, we have Clay.
Hello, everyone. Clay Tam here, born and raised in Hawaii, and just fished all my life, and pretty much it was my passion, and this is where I am today. I'm director of research for nonprofit group, Pacific Islands Fisheries Group. We do some fish research with NOAA, partnerships, and we also, most of our projects involve fishermen, cooperative fisheries research. All of the guys we work with are fishermen, and nobody better else to work with than the guys who are on the water all the time. And that has been a big plus for us doing that project. So thank you. Nice to be here.
Awesome. All right, yes, and give our whole panel a round of applause, you guys, because as you can see, we've got a good group today. All right, so, I feel like everyone in here, we're all fish lovers, right? Whether it's fishing or if not, we're likely consumers as well. And I think for a lot of people, especially consumers, something that's top of mind is, why is fish so expensive, especially local fresh fish, right? And so we're going to start with Brooks. Now, of course, Brooks, you have run the Honolulu Fish Auction for a very long time. When it comes to, the front of the line, you're there. You're seeing it every single day with all the local fishermen. So let's talk a bit more about it. For the everyday consumer, let's talk about the rising cost of fish. What is it that you see are the key contributions to the rising costs?
Well, Kelly, actually the answer is simple. It's basically supply and demand. But I don't think you're here this evening to hear just supply and demand. Let's get into some of the particulars here. First of all, let's start with demand. How many people know what the per capita consumption is of Hawaii's people in terms of fish and seafood? Not the fisheries guys. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, good. So what is it? Yes, you might say that. Well, as back in the 70s and 80s, it was estimated that the per capita consumption of Hawaii's people compared to the mainland was 3 times more than the rest of the mainland. And that was back in the 80s. I strongly believe that today that reality is significantly higher. And so demand has grown significantly. I mean, look at poke bowls. This is the whole world is appreciating poke bowls. So that's put a lot of pressure on our resources. The other thing is that inflation has been a problem for everyone, as we all know. And so that's not any different for our fishermen and our wholesalers and our retailers. And so that's part of a couple of the factors. The other thing is that sustainability. Sustainability, in order to do things in a sustainable manner, we have to be that much more responsible. And what this means is that in order to protect resources, some of our fisheries scientists and managers have decided to close off some fishing areas, which is understandable. It's also been a matter of adjusting gear and changing gear types relative to what's happening in the fisheries. And Eric can speak more to that. The other thing is, another factor is competition. Our fishermen fish in outside of the 200-mile limit. We're fishing in international waters. So for all intents and purposes, we are competing with Taiwanese and other fleets that are competing for the same fish. Another factor is that during the pandemic, which has adversely affected everyone, fisheries efforts internationally were affected, as well as marketing. And a big problem was shipping. Whatever fish we caught, our fishermen caught, there was still not enough fish for our Hawaii consumers. And so our wholesalers actually imported fish from other nations as well. Well, with the shipping problem, that cut out a significant part of that supply chain. The other thing is that seasonality and global warming are issues that I think a lot of people, well, people in Hawaii understand from, say, mango season and lychee season and all of that. Seasonality out in the ocean, where it's significantly larger. As Laura has indicated earlier, there's significant changes in the environment that we're seeing. And this is one of the factors that, again, I think, like our farmer friends would agree, predictability before was one thing. I think over the last 15 years or so, predictability has changed. It hasn't been the same seasonal realities that we used to see before. And so there's a lot of factors involved here, but that would be, I think, a part of why prices are so high.
Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, and I want both Eric and Clay's opinion on the same topic as well, but Eric, he mentioned that other folks across the mainland, poke bowls are a big thing. So let's talk specifically. Do you notice maybe a specific species of fish that there's a shortage on? Or let's talk even about the fish that are in Hawaii. How much of what is actually caught in the islands stays here in the islands versus what's shipped elsewhere?
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to speak principally on the production of the Hawaii Longline fleet, which I'm most familiar with. And it is the largest food-producing group or entity in Hawaii. Our fleet has about 150 vessels, and we produce more food than any other ag product in the state, as well as the value. There is seasonality to our fishery. Principally, we're targeting big-eye tuna, we catch yellowfin tuna, we also seasonally catch swordfish. But the beauty of it is that the fishery operates year-round. The auction operates 6 days a week. There is usually 5 boats landing 6 days a week here, delivering 80,000 pounds a day. And the alternative to not having this fleet operating in Hawaii, I think, is a grim outlook. It's a bad situation for Hawaii because of the demand that Bruce was talking about. Everyone loves to eat fish. It's a healthy food choice. It's a cultural food choice. It's not ideal to have $100 a pound ahi or $50 a pound ahi. That's not what we are striving to do. We want to produce healthy, sustainable food for everyone. The supply and demand issues get, factor in, and prices do go up and they go down as well. But it's cultural to have, poke ahi at baby luau's or graduation parties. And that's, this time of year, we have people calling us all the time, how can we get some ahi for our events? And, the price of fishing is very costly. Brooks mentioned the regulatory side. Our fishery is the most highly monitored and comprehensively long-line tuna fishery in the world. And we are competing daily amongst, foreign competition on the high seas. But without local fishermen and the Hawaii longline fleet, sustainable fisheries, what's the alternative? The alternative is foreign sourced, imported, gas treated, frozen, who knows what else is included in that, and it's likely caught with very little monitoring, very little regulation, shipped in, and so that's not a good alternative for Hawaii. And so I think we're all here because this is very important issues about overfishing. Are we taking too much? My simple answer is no, and we can get into some of that a little bit later, but I truly believe that the value that Hawaii fishermen bring to our society, our community, our culture is so important, and we have to do all we can to preserve that in perpetuity.
And then I'm just going to do a quick follow-up because I don't think you answered some of my questions. No, you're good. I'm just, making sure this happens. But have you noticed, though, even if it is the longline fishing, have you noticed a shortage of specific species?
Yeah, it's fishing. It's not catching all the time, right? So there's seasonality, there's oceanographic conditions that affect how production is. And the last 3 years, we've been in a La Nina condition, and our main target catch of big-eye tuna, for example, the supply has gone down 20% because our catch rates went down. And I think it's largely oceanographic based. It's not a resource stock status issue because, as Laura mentioned, it's evaluated with stock assessment to be not subject to overfishing and generally healthy. But there are times of year, like right now, the longliners have been bringing in on the light side. And, social media blows up. Why is, poke grade ahi $30 a pound? Well, it's because some of the production's been on the lower side. And it happens. It does happen seasonally, and Clay can speak to multiple fisheries that go through these patterns. But I think the take-home point is that dynamics, the ocean is very dynamic, and sometimes you have years of high recruitment, and you'll see it for several years throughout the stock and the population. And then sometimes it's lower. I think we're in a situation where we're transitioning to El Nino right now too. But overall, it's not necessarily because of overfishing or too much fishing pressure. It's largely the fisheries that we're talking about, Hawaii's fisheries, the cycles are largely driven by oceanographic conditions.
And definitely changing, and that's why the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, when they were releasing their data, they were seeing the warmer sea surface temperatures, and that's why it was looking like it was going to be going into an El Nino phase, and that's why we have a more active hurricane season expected. So the sea surface temperature is definitely one of those first indicators. And then one more specific question: do you happen to know how much of the Hawaii fish caught in the islands stays in the islands?
Yeah, there's been a few studies on this, and it also depends on the species you're talking about and the seasonality of things too. But generally, around 70 to 80% of the fish that is certainly harvested by our fleet goes to the auction, as well as the bottom fish, kule, that stays here in Hawaii. 20 to 30% goes to the mainland. The species that we land are not exported to any foreign country, so it's generally considered a U.S. domestic product. But most of the fish that is caught around Hawaii waters, landed here in Hawaii, stays in Hawaii.
Cool. Thanks so much, Eric. All right, and Clay, now you, of course, work with the national and international fishery councils throughout the Pacific. So are the costs that you see here in Hawaii, are they like anywhere else?
When it comes to costs, it's kind of hard to compare. When you look at the foreign fleets, they have cheap labor. They have government subsidies that support their fishery. there's a lot of infrastructure changes. So you're right off the bat competing with that. In addition to what Eric and Brooke said about how being highly regulated, it costs money to implement a lot of these things that they do: VMS tracking, data logging, observer coverage, especially in the swordfish boats where it's 100% coverage. And all that is to be compliant and to support, along with HACCP seafood safety. So there's things in place to assure that qualitative seafood that is being delivered to the auction is sustainable and in addition to being safe.
Yes. And of course, we want to continue a thriving population of our fish so that not only, of course, we can continue to enjoy it, but generations to come can enjoy it as well. So what specifically are our Hawaii fisheries doing to make sure that that's the case?
Well, being born and raised in here, we're always taught that, you take only what you need. I mean, you're going to maybe feed your family, but other than that, it's being responsible, or they say kuleana for the fisheries resource. And for the small boat fishery, bottom fish and that, we always rotate spots. It's never go and pound one spot. That's what we're taught. And it's important because you got to rest the place. It's just like egg people. You got to rotate the crop. You want a productive crops coming up, you need to, do the right things. Same with fishing.
So it's great to hear, obviously, what the fisheries are doing. But I think a lot of us, or actually I think a lot of us here are also working in the business, but some of us are just consumers. So I think people that are potentially watching at home too, that are going to see this online later, we want to know, what can we do? Right? Because honestly, I'm not in the fish fishing business. I would love to make an impact though. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. What kind of the average person can do to support a thriving marine ecosystem and to support our local fisheries and fishermen. So Brooks, let's start with you once again. Obviously you see the variety of fish and seafood at the auction. Let's talk about some of the local seafood products that we should look out for in the local fisheries. What should people be buying?
Well, I think first and foremost, we believe that you should support the domestic fishermen. And this is the reason, and the reason why in particular, as Eric has mentioned also, that we have made it a commitment to do things in a sustainable and responsible manner. And so we're always concerned about not just the species, but the marketing, as well as we've extended into educating, developing educational programs as well, so that our public can better understand, not just the public, the youngsters as well as the chefs and everyone else can better understand what we deal with, and then just the special nature of our species, our resource base. We're very lucky to be where we are in the Pacific, and I think the fact that we have access to all these species is very special for us. But we, again, as Eric has spoken to, we've got to take that responsibility on ourselves. It's incumbent on us to do the right things for the right reasons. And here again, one of my problems has always been, if you can eat anything you want any time of the year, there's something wrong with that statement. Because as Clay has mentioned also, seasonality, we grew up eating seasonal fish. And so when the demand factor starts to get into other areas where it's non-seasonal, now you begin to put a lot of more pressure on the resource base.
And I think that rings true for a lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, it's so easily accessible now. I mean, when you talk about going, to Foodland, get a poke bowl, how many of us don't eat ahi year round?
Yeah. So there's a lot of species, but let's also understand that, we're talking about nearshore, deep sea bottom fish, as well as the open ocean, the pelagic species. And so each and every one of these sectors has its own issues and concerns and challenges. And so no matter what part of the fisheries you're a part of, it still comes down to us as individuals to do the responsible thing, to understand the biology of our species. So we don't want to overfish. And with all the pressures that we have, growing population and effort, the near shore is even of greater concern. And so I would guess that each and every one of these people up here would feel the same way, that we have always respected fishermen and the fishing community throughout. near shore, deep sea bottom, open ocean, whether they're subsistence, recreational, or commercial. And so we need to feed people. That's part of our biggest challenge, is protecting the resource, but also feeding people. And that's a very difficult balance to maintain. So this is another reason why I think aquaculture is important, and we got to support aquaculture. Because again, as has been brought up and mentioned, this is a significant source of protein. And our population size is growing and continuing to do that. So how do we responsibly feed people?
Thanks so much, Brooks. And of course, Brooks mentioned the seasonal fish, and we talked about that even when in your first response. So let's talk about what we can be eating at different times of the year. What should we be doing, especially when it comes to supporting good fisheries management?
Yeah, I would answer that. There is a fishery that our fleet undertakes seasonally, and that's the shallow set fishery for swordfish. And for some reason, not a lot of local people eat swordfish. The immediate reaction is, "Oh, is that marlin?" Well, no, it is a, you know, a type of marlin, but it's a totally different species, and it's one of the tastiest fish in the ocean. And we catch a lot of it, and the main market for swordfish is the U.S. mainland, Boston. A lot of it goes there. So we've been working on some campaigns to try and get more local people to eat swordfish, because it is really tasty, and it's very sustainable. It's very lightly exploited in the North Pacific. But Brooks talked about some of the seasonality with nearshore fishing, and certainly there's habitat issues with nearshore fishing and the resource and habitat degradation, coral reef degradation. We all know this. There's serious challenges for the state to manage nearshore fisheries. On the pelagic side, the open ocean side of seafood, our fleet is able to roam essentially 1,000 miles from Honolulu. So we reduce the seasonality part of it, because and able to bring back ahi all year around. And certainly there's times a year where catch rates are higher, but all year round there is ahi being landed, and so we can enjoy that. If there wasn't a longline fleet being able to roam so far, we would be limited to a more seasonal run of ahi, which more smaller scale fishermen capture and harvest this time of year. But because we are able to fish greater distances, we're able to have a year-round supply of fresh, sustainable, high-quality ahi that everyone enjoys. And I think that's an important part of recognition of what the value that a pretty large fleet brings to Hawaii. Because without that, you would be very much more limited in your seafood choices, or you just come from somewhere else. They come from the outside, and most of that outside is imported, and it's frozen. And I don't really like to eat frozen ahi too much.
Because we know the difference, right? And it's funny, I think we're so spoiled because of that accessibility, though, that's really, we haven't needed to eat seasonally, right? And so he mentions, why would you not eat swordfish? And I think, oh, swordfish, it's meatier, it's firmer, it's more of like the steak of meats and fish, right? And so, but also there are so many great ways to use it, and there are fabulous swordfish dishes. So yeah, it just made me realize, oh, I'm so spoiled, and a lot of us are, that we need to be really incorporating more of this variety. And I think that's a good mindset. But that's not just people in this room. That's getting it out to everyone. Not just to be eating the standard fish that you're used to, or even the name that you're used to hearing. So that's a really good point. Okay, so Clay, obviously I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But let's talk about sustainable fishing practices. Are there any, especially when we're looking at, buying seafood, what should we be looking for to make sure that we're making the sustainable right choice?
That's a good question. There's a lot of opportunity out there to buy fish, but really, when it comes to, as Eric alluded to, a lot of the small boat nearshore fisheries is managed by the state. And so the dealers are required to buy from licensed fishermen. And so if you go to reputable fishmongers such as Tamashiro and some of those guys that buy from an auction and they buy direct from fishermen, those fishermen are required to have a license. Having the license, they're required to report. So having them be able to report the status of the fishery, and that data goes into the assessment of the fishery is very important. If we start to harvest, over-harvest, or we start buying stuff that's not being recorded, we have a problem.
All right, thanks so much, you guys. All right, well, first off, I want to thank all of you guys for your great responses. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of our audience members have some questions as well, and I want to be able to open the floor and have time to talk to you guys as well. So I want to now ask Laura back to the stage as well, because I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to question her too, or have questions for her. And so we have a couple of folks, Liz and Pam, I believe, are going to be here. So they'll come over to you with a microphone if you guys are able to raise your hands. But if anyone has a specific question for either Laura, Brooks, Eric, or Clay, please right now raise your hand. We'd love to get more of a conversation going. Oh, I know there's opinions out there. All right, perfect, right in the front row. Oh, sorry, no, they'll come over with a mic. We all want to hear you.
She's got it.
I was wondering if you have noticed that we're having more no fishing zones in order to make sure that we have the sustainable fishing?
I can respond to that a little bit. Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, we have had expansion of very, very large closed area that our fleet is subject to under Marine National Monuments and the Antiquities Act. I wouldn't say that was in response to fishery management problems. That's more of a sort of conservation goal and ocean biological diversity objectives, but not necessarily in response to a fisheries management issue. But it's a tool in the toolbox, and I think the state of Hawaii is actually exploring more closed areas around nearshore areas, and I don't want to get into that subject. It is controversial because really it could be one tool in the toolbox, but there's also a lot more that goes into fisheries management. Clay talked about the data reporting. You know, fishermen have to report, and the agencies have to collect that information. The scientists have to use that information to perform stock assessments. If you don't have very good data, your stock assessments are going to be poor. And you know, there's a lot of criticism in some by fishermen because the state of Hawaii doesn't do stock assessments, whereas the federal government does. So you know, there's 300 plus people employed at Ford Island, the NOAA facility, that largely their career is focused on pelagic fishing, the bottom fish fishery that is managed by the federal government. The bottom fish fisheries co-managed with the state and the feds. But there's just a lot more that goes into the management of pelagics and bottom fish in terms of science and stock assessments. But it's a tool, and you know, we have independent observers that ride along on vessels, for example. And there is a place for marine protected areas. I would argue that it's just one aspect of fisheries management, and largely the proliferation of marine protected areas is focused on reserving areas for biological diversity. And it also could be helpful if you don't have a very strong enforcement regime in place, or a monitoring regime or a scientific regime. So it's one tool, but I don't think it's a panacea.
Thanks, Eric.
We-
Any other questions?
Yep, we have one right here. I just had a quick comment. Thank you guys for presenting. Can you comment a little bit about the workforce needs and the outlook for sustaining this industry?
Work in what particularly are you interested in? Workforce at the auction, workforce in terms of crew. Everybody's having a problem finding good people these days, so that's a basic problem to begin with.
Yeah, I'll comment further. I mean, I think there's COVID reality really showed that you know the workforce is a challenge in a lot of different industries, and there were you know, shortages all over the place, including in our industry. But labor across the board in any sort of food production system is critical. I mean, look at how the United States produces a lot of its food in agriculture. We know, there's workers all from all over the world that are employed in the ag sector and in our fleet. Many of the crew are foreign crew. They come to work in Hawaii or on our fleet, several-year contracts, and without foreign crew, our fishery probably wouldn't be able to survive because you lack the labor to produce the food. And I think any farmer in the room or anyone that's involved in ag and involved in service industry knows that, in the United States and Hawaii in particular, there's a major shortage of labor in every industry.
And yeah, if I could just add on to that, it's something that we hear across the country when we talk to seafood communities around the country, is that the aging of the fleet, and that also just that people are moving on to other opportunities. There's not the shoreside support that's needed, and so NOAA Fisheries is, we're getting ready to release in the next couple of weeks our national seafood strategy, and a major component of that is looking at one of the 4 goals is looking at workforce development and infrastructure and marketing and promotion needs. So it's something that we are hearing from around the country, and there are some opportunities. Sea Grant is a great opportunity to provide some professional development and training, and we're looking at creative ways that maybe we can support growing the.
We're laughing because we put in a grant proposal and we didn't get funded for.
Oh no! I didn't review that proposal.
It was a young fisherman's development program where we
yes,
can get more local kids involved in the industry, not on the processing side, but on the water. It's a great proposal. I don't know what happened.
Let me take a look at it.
Once again, little Hawaii gets tossed to the back of the bin. Yeah, please look into that.
But
do my
also
best.
wonderful to see that you guys have taken that initiative to go for those grants. So let's go next year. We'll see. All right. I think we have a question over there.
Okay. Hello. I was wondering if you guys notice a reduction in the size of the fish caught over the years, like aku and ahi especially. Okay.
I'd say that's a great question, because that's a metric that fisheries managers look at, is the size of the fish and the composition of the catch. And
But I haven't seen any reduction, particularly in size. We have seen, over the years, some 200-pound big eyes, and so we're still seeing large fish. The other thing that we're seeing, as Eric has mentioned also, is that there are recruitment years. So there are years when we see a lot of small fish, but what that means for us is that depending on the species, a couple of years, 3 or 4 years down the road, we're expecting to see more fish of those species. And so these are cycles that are a significant part of our fisheries reality. And so the market adjusts accordingly. So recently, when the pandemic was happening and all of that, we had trawlers that were making a lot of money. Funny, nobody calls and says thank you for the good prices and everything. But soon as prices went down, it was like, hey, what's happening? Why is my marlin not selling? Why is it so cheap? Well, it just so happened that this time of the year, the marlin are coming in numbers. And so that, again, supply and demand, that changes the complexity of the prices and the market realities. So this is a very, again, as Eric has said, is a very dynamic reality.
Yeah, I'll just add, there are, time series that show the size of fish over the last 20, 30 years. The Western Pacific Council online has an annual report that shows those figures, and over the last 20, 30 years, the size of big eye and yellowfin have been about the same, about 88 pounds on average, and it's been fairly flat for both yellowfin and big eye, as well as marlin and some of the other species too. So that's an indicator that the fishery is not having a large impact on the stock. You would see, if you're having a large impact, you'd see maybe much more smaller fish. You wouldn't see the big individuals that Brooks was talking about. In fact, the last couple of months, we've seen very large big eye being landed, 200-pound, 150-pound big eye, which to me is an indicator of the stock health.
Yeah, and just one comment about that is that, at least for the nearshore, there's been a study conducted by Dr. Kevin Wang, and it plotted the Akuli, and they overlaid the rainfall. And it was a mirror image. With the years you had high rainfall, 2 years later you had bumper crops of Akuli. And we've seen this recently. There's been literally tons of Halalu this past year. And now there's a bunch of Akuli in the Big Island. Also, we've seen a huge recruitment of small baby paca. So some of you guys that catch Opelu Akuli, they've been catching them in those schools. I've got samples from Big Island all the way to Kauai. So it was important, and that's how Hawaiians looked at their resource and back then, was to look at the recruitment. And if there's recruitment, there's spawners. Something is driving that cycle. We've seen cycles of veil run every 60 years or so. There's constant changes in the environment, and the indicators that are out there, like Brooke said, mango blossoms and different things that happen within our environment that leads to some of these changes. And I think that's an important part and something we've taken a hold of now. And the last 3 years, we've had this fishermen's observation put on by the advisory panel with Westpac, collecting this information, because it is important that we tie that into some of the things that are happening with the environment in terms of temperature and all these other climate changes.
And with such a tight correlation, that kind of makes me nervous for the future, especially with climate change. I mean, becoming more of a problem.
Right, it is important. And for the resources here in the main Hawaiian Islands, you got to understand that a lot of the life that was here, Mauka to Makai, when they talk about it, this has evolved over thousands of years. So what happens up Mauka to Makai is a direct reflection of our resources. And I was telling my friend, because they had a problem with salmon, this year on the West Coast. But when you look at it and look at the drought they've gone through for the last, several years, only this year they got big rain. But now with the big rain, they've had a huge recruitment of anchovies, halibut, and sablefish along that coast. So there is that relationship, and I think something to pay attention to. Yeah.
When you were mentioning earlier, I mean, in terms of predictability, I mean, these really random and major weather events are going to make it harder for the prediction.
Yeah, I comment on climate change, and you asked what consumers can do and to be sort of more responsible in buying. And I think there's several studies recently published that show consuming seafood and buying seafood versus other protein actually has a lower carbon impact than say, cattle and pork. So the amount of carbon emissions to produce 1 pound of seafood is about 10 times less than the carbon emissions to produce 1 pound of beef. And we're in a whole new paradigm with climate change issues, and I think that's an important aspect to consider when you're at the supermarket or at the restaurant is those choices in addition to health that we know about seafood.
And then do we have more viewer questions? Okay. Viewer questions. Sorry, have it. Audience questions.
Thanks for the opportunity. I just need to give a shout out to some of our local scientists that have done amazing work, especially regarding the spillover effect and the positive benefits that commercial fisheries have seen from marine protected areas where we get the spawning and the increase in numbers. So it really is a benefit to all, both commercial fisheries and others. But my question actually, and I don't know, Clay, if you're officially representing Westpac or other, or if someone else might answer, but it's been relatively quiet around NOAA and Westpac and HLA regarding the Fukushima Daiichi release of the radiated water. Obviously, our Pacific Island Forum neighbors, 18 countries, opposed the release, as do a number of other countries. So obviously, that could have a tremendous impact here on human health and the environment. Our local scientists here from the University of Hawaii have expressed grave concerns about the release, but I haven't heard anything from Westpac or NOAA, so I don't know. I mean, talking about food safety in our future, it's just such a potential impact here. So whether or not you want to say anything, thanks.
Yeah, I have, it's not an issue that I personally have been tracking, but so I don't have a response for you. I know that it is, you know, I know that we've seen the headlines, so I will, I can follow up with you and reach out to our regional science center folks and get back to you.
Do any other panelists have an input?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's a scary proposition to imagine, you know, your ahi that could be radioactive, and no one wants that. I think there has been some conflicting science about it, so I think the general public probably doesn't know what to believe. I don't know what to believe because people are all saying different things. I think the official kind of government stance is that we don't have anything to worry about, but to me, that's not good enough. I think there needs to be some serious investigation on it. But there also, you know, the point about spillover. And thanks for bringing that up. I mean, we're in a reality that there is conflicting science. We see it daily, and I think, you know, consumers, you have to do your due diligence to weed through that. And it's not easy because some of the headlines you read are very much attention grabbing. But, you know, there has been science that refutes the spillover on tuna populations recently as well. And I'm not saying that its issue is completely resolved, but, you know, you have to weed through some of the noise and some of the advocacy science that is out there. And I think the point being that there's a lot of focus that goes into fisheries management in Hawaii. There's a lot of attention, a lot of resources that go into it. And, you know, I think the impression that you left on me, Laura, was that, you know, the United States is a global leader. And for consumers to have that choice, immediately know that if you're buying from a U.S., you know, managed fishery, a locally produced source, you're in a much better place than you are if it's foreign. So, you know, with fisheries, it's not as easy as ag or forestry where you can count how many trees are growing in the forest, for example. There's always a lot of uncertainty with fisheries, the dynamic conditions that we talked about. But just know that there is a lot of resources and people involved in ensuring that these fish stocks and these fisheries are sustainable forever and that we have fish forever.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, you guys. And thank you all for your questions. I got the sign that said POW, so unfortunately we don't have time. Unfortunately, we don't have time. Or maybe? Okay. There is one more, but someone already has a mic.
Sorry, I have a mic, so I'm going to use it. I had a question. The legislature is looking to do more pilot work around restorative aquaculture, and you alluded to that work before, and I'm wondering if the industry would support that work. I know that we're talking about, you know, you folks are doing traditional fishing, and restorative aquaculture is more about like restoring the ocean forests and really focusing on limu and shellfish, but I'm wondering if that's work that the industry can support.
I would say yes. Now, how we do that is another issue. This is where we have to collaborate. But I think there are others in this room and others on this panel that have always had an appreciation for aquaculture and mariculture. In fact, from my experience, I really would have to say this. The Hawaiians' approach, the Japanese approach to aquaculture is the best because they work with Mother Nature. And so I think it's important that, yes, indeed, understand and realize the significance of the fisheries and aquaculture being complementary. Now, there's a lot more pressure on the resource base, so I think it's incumbent on us to indeed support aquaculture. And I think that's something of the future, definitely.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, again, as I said in my presentation, NOAA's stance is that we need both. Both are critical, and we're not going to reduce our fishing, but we need to increase access to this healthy and healthy protein by farming more. And we have a number of different approaches. We just recently put out a 5-year strategic plan for aquaculture about ways that we can grow it around the country. We are looking at having aquaculture opportunity areas where well-sited areas that take into account other ocean uses so that there's not as much conflict between commercial fishing or other transportation, things like that. So we're looking at creative ways that we can make that easily available and also eventually reduce some of the barriers to making that a reality.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I want to thank, of course, Laura Diederick and the entire panel. Of course, once again, we have Brooks Takenaka, Clay Tam, and Eric Kingma. So thanks so much, you guys, for being a part of this. And I know they are going to be hanging around a little bit, so if you guys did have any questions or wanted to get a little more clarity, I think a lot of them are up for discussion and up to talk to you folks. Now, of course, we all think it's important to commit to managing healthy, thriving fisheries in Hawaii. It's great to see some of the work that you guys are doing and great to talk more about it. But now let's send it back over to Denise.
Keep the program on track. So thank you again, Kelly, and thank you again to our panelists and our keynote speaker, Laura Diederick. I also want to thank all of you for the great conversation. This is a great Eat, Think, Drink. We appreciate everyone who came out tonight and invite you to take a seat for the eating and drinking portion, which will happen. You have to walk outside the ballroom to the other side for the eating and drinking portion. I want to thank the Waikiki Beach Marriott Resort and Spa's executive sous chef, Nuno Alves, who created a dish using local Hawaiian swordfish, which I think is in season now, correct?
There we go, swordfish. This is the inspiration we need, guys, right?
And I also want to let you know we have some note cards for you that were created by our public school student winners of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation Localicious Art and Video Contest. And we are also giving you each a coupon for a dozen eggs from Kalei Eggs. So I want to thank Kalei Eggs for that. Finally, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Central Pacific Bank. Thank you, Brant, for being here. I know it was frustrating getting here with the parking. And all of our other sponsors for making this Eat, Think, Drink series possible. I again want to thank Waikiki Beach Marriott Resort and Spa for working with us this evening. On behalf of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, thank you, and we'll see you on the other side.